Hi, this is Pi Radio, and this is Mango Masala, Pi Radio South Asian channel. And Pi Radio is Manchester's #1 leading youth-led radio station. I'm Simran, and I'm joined here with Shuranjeet from Taraki. And Taraki is an organisation which is focused on supporting mental health, specifically within the Punjabi community. And I'll let Shuranjeet tell you a little bit more about Taraki and how we started the organisation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me today, Simran. It's great to come and chat about Taraki and how we started and some of the work that we're up to at the moment. So I started Taraki in October 2017, and Taraki works with Punjabi communities to reshape approaches to mental health. And the reason I started Taraki was when I transitioned from home, which was Birmingham, to uni, which was outside of Birmingham. That was a really, really difficult transition. You know, going from a space where I could be myself, I could feel at home, into a different area where I felt like the odd one out all the time. And suddenly there weren't really many people who looked like me in my student community. That was a really challenging time in my life. And, you know, it led to me isolating myself. It led to me pushing myself away from friends and family. But importantly, you know, I accessed and I was able to access support through my friends at that really difficult time. And basically, I recognized that there were so many other people experiencing these kinds of challenges, but they weren't lucky enough to access that support. And so the start of Taraki was really just based out of my experiences and mental health challenges, me being able to access support and me wanting to see other people to be able to access support so they can live their life how they want to live it.
So moving from home to uni, did you feel that you were in an environment where, like you said, you didn't see as many people that looked like you? So do you have a little bit of a challenge in terms of like identity and how you felt that you placed in that new environment?
Yeah, you know, I'll be completely honest. Back home in Birmingham, I could walk up and down, you know, the local kind of Desi street, the South Asian street next to me, and I don't feel at all out of place. You know, I can just walk up and down, be myself. I can go where I want to go and I can engage with people. And, you know, I'm shown love. Importantly, you know, I'm shown love by different kinds of people. And the challenge was when I went to uni, there wasn't that kind of love in the same way. I felt as though I really stuck out from the crowd in a negative way. You know, I got really quite ignorant questions from people. I was having people kind of make me think that my identity, you know, as a Punjabi Sikh man, was something that I should be shying away from. It was something that made me feel as though I was the odd one out. And so there were these massive questions, exactly like you say, around identity. Who was I? You know, was it there was a me at home? And these are really hard questions to deal with, especially when you're that age. And I know many students go through this as well in different ways, but it just shows us that there are so many things happening at that time.
Yeah, exactly. So the birth of Taraki as we know it. So do you want to speak a little bit more about the work that you do?
Sure thing. So for those who don't know, Taraki is a word found in Punjabi, in Hindi, and also in Urdu. And it's a part of the verb to progress, you know, to take steps forward, to advance. And when we work with Punjabi communities to reshape approaches to mental health, we have 4 areas of interest. There's mental health awareness, mental health education, social support, and research. And just really quickly, I'm just going to explain why we have those different things as well. Because mental health awareness, we can start off with awareness. It's a really, really important place to start. But just because someone's aware about something, they don't necessarily have a level of education or an understanding that goes beyond awareness. Awareness is a really important first step, but it's not the whole process. And so really we're thinking about awareness, education, which kind of builds on awareness. It actually makes us feel equipped, confident, and comfortable with these topics. Then we have social supports, which is where we actually have spaces for discussion spaces, peer support spaces for Punjabi men, Punjabi women, Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks, and even our Punjabi student work as well. And importantly, those social support places are where we can actually practice these skills, where we can actually, you know, change how we interact with ourselves, interact with each other. And then finally, research is an important part of our work because there aren't many people asking these questions. within Punjabi communities, there aren't many people asking, you know, what are the main challenges? How are people accessing support? How can we best support people now? And so really we've taken that responsibility onto ourselves to be able to guide that discussion, which helps our work, and it also helps people externally to understand what is going on within our communities.
Have you found that there's been a sort of growth of awareness since the birth of Taraki, people reaching out and explaining that they've learned loads more? Because I know one of the big barriers in mental health awareness, especially within our community, is things like the lack of language, the lack of terminology, the lack of just key phrases and awareness and ability to communicate these things. So have you found that since Taraki has grown, that people are reaching out more and encouraging conversations and being a lot more open?
So, it was really hard at the start, right? Because, I remember speaking, before we started Taraki, I remember speaking to some relatives, and I was talking about mental health, and they said, "Oh, eh, gore de chija," which means, "Oh, it's a white person's thing." And that, I didn't think, you're completely wrong. I just thought there is something wrong in how we're talking about mental health and mental health awareness in our society, that this information isn't getting through to the people in our communities. And so one of our main things at the beginning was to really push and encourage Punjabi men to speak a bit more openly about mental health, because we saw a real lack of that discussion within mainstream kind of culture. And I remember, we had a series of where Punjabi men talk about their mental health and mental well-being. And we used to get, maybe one submission every few weeks at the beginning. And it was really hard to get that conversation going. But, when we had 5 or 10, 15 submissions, suddenly there were people who are willing to get in contact a bit more easily. People will come forward, they come and want to share their stories and share their experiences. And so we have seen a real increase in being more confident in talking about mental health, which is a really, really important first step, as I said.
That's fantastic. Speaking a little bit about COVID and the last 2 years odd of what's been going on, how has that affected Taraki and the work that you guys do?
So COVID obviously has impacted all of us in huge amounts of ways, but importantly, COVID has had different types of impacts on different parts of our society. Those who might be socioeconomically privileged or have different experiences to those who aren't. And so for us, the main thing that we did at the beginning of COVID was do a bit of research to understand what are some of the key challenges that people are experiencing, what are some of the key supports that people are using. And what that did was really show us how Punjabi communities were experiencing COVID-19 and their mental health. And one thing, for example, it outlined that LGBTQ plus Punjabi folks were experiencing particular challenges that other groups of Punjabi folks weren't experiencing. So it really helped us to be precise with the work that we were doing. So after we did this COVID research, it was shared in various kinds of places. It's been cited in loads of different kind of texts and research. It basically showed us the roadmap to how we needed to support our communities. And so we've really enhanced our work with Punjabi men, Punjabi women, Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks. We've been doing a load of work on mental health and faith, because that was a topic that came up for loads in the research. And we've also been really enhancing our student work, because we recognize that students are a population who, needed different kinds of support at this point, and specific and tailored support as well.
That's fantastic. It's really good that you guys are tailoring, and you're not just putting things out because you think it's that needs the work, that you're actually doing the research and finding out the exact stress points and how those can be targeted and what work can be done, right?
Exactly, because I feel sometimes we can always have a lot of energy in saying we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. But it's important to just take a breath, take a step back, and ask those who we're trying to serve, ask them, what is it that we can be doing for you? And then you can kind of fill those gaps, and it can be impactful.
So in light of Men's Mental Health Month, I think we'd speak a little bit about the work that Taraki does geared towards Punjabi men in the community. So if you'd like to outline a couple of the projects or some of the work that you do specifically supporting men.
So for me, there are 3 projects that come to my mind. The first is the very first project that we really pushed through Taraki, which I mentioned earlier, where it was about sharing the experiences, the stories, and the knowledge of Punjabi men around their experiences and mental health challenges. And the really important thing with this was before there wasn't somewhere you could go where they had all of these experiences and you had all of this type of these types of information. And so we started creating that bank. You know, we had those experiences and those testimonials so people could see themselves reflected in these discussions. And it really just created a little spark. And from then, what we actually started doing, we started having in-person peer support sessions, discussion spaces, open forums. As I mentioned, we have these for Punjabi men, Punjabi women, Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks, and also students. But with the men's space, you know, we started in person. We used to have it in London, in Birmingham. I was helping get it up and going in Toronto. And we just discussed different topics that people didn't feel they could talk about with their family or friends. You know, a space where people could be honest, they could be open, and, you know, they could listen and learn and connect with each other as well. They could build their relationships with other guys and, you know, in a really, really kind of wholesome and connected way. And so since the pandemic started, we've kind of moved onto online, but we're hopefully going to soon be starting in person at some point in the near future. And finally, our work around Punjabi men, we're actually developing a curriculum, so a training package that will actually train people so that they can hold spaces, peer support spaces for Punjabi men as well. And so, you know, I was saying before, we were running our spaces in different cities. What we actually want to be able to do is work with organizations around the country, around the world, to develop these things and help them to be able to run these things themselves.
Obviously, with the research that you guys have done within men's mental health, what have you found have been some of the bigger obstacles community-wise that have prevented people, or specifically men, from being able to access the help and support that they need?
You know, one of the biggest obstacles for me, and one of the biggest obstacles we've observed, is around these ideas of what it means to kind of be a man. So how our ideas of gender, how our ideas of masculinity, and it also links into, you know, ethnicity, sexuality, that kind of thing, how these can really shape what we are allowed and not allowed to do. And when we think about mental health, when we think about talking about our mental health, that's perceived as something which is vulnerable. And being vulnerable within understandings of masculinities is often pointed to as being weak. When in reality, in our view, vulnerability and being open is a signal of strength rather than of weakness. And so one of our key pushes, one of our key aims is to try and change that perception, is to try and show Punjabi men and men more widely that it is okay to talk about these things. It's okay to talk openly about mental health challenges. It's okay to access support when you need it. It's okay to be open. It's okay to be vulnerable. Because, you know, we need to be able to provide that support when people are expressing themselves in such a way.
And just to wrap up lastly, I was going to say, is there any kind of advice that you'd like to give out to people that might be struggling with their mental health, specifically from a male point of view? And then also, what changes can we all make to improve men's mental health in our daily lives?
I would say, you know, one of the main kind of things that helped me when I was experiencing my challenges was taking that first step to just talk to someone about what I was experiencing, whether that was talking in person, whether that was talking on text, online, whatever. Just taking that first step, it might seem incredibly, incredibly daunting. But if you're not able to live your life the way you want to live it, if there's something that's stopping you from, you know, going and having a chat with the big group of people, because that was the thing with me, you know, I wanted to go and speak with people, but I found it really hard. If there's something that's stopping you from doing that, then let's think about why that might be, and let's try and identify that and maybe access some support as well. And for the people more widely about what we can all do, you know, sometimes people say, oh, you know, you're a real good role model for mental health. What I say to them is, actually, everyone can be a fantastic role model for mental health. You know, one of the biggest things that we can do is listen, is actively listen. we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should be listening twice as much as we speak in our conversations. And when I'm saying actively listen, it's not just hearing someone, but it is making sure that they feel listened to, that they feel heard, because that is one of the biggest tools that we have in our toolkit. And just to kind of finish off, it's one of those things that we don't learn how to listen when we're younger. I think it's less than 5% of our time, when we're in primary school, is spent learning how to listen. We learn how to write, we learn how to read. But when we're adults and we're out in the world, listening is one of the most important skills that we need to use. And so even if we haven't learned it in the past, we need to reconnect with listening, because at the end of the day, listening could literally save someone from going into a particular difficult situation.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like that's advice that everybody needs to hear a little bit these days, especially. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking the time to join me this morning, and let the people know where they can find you guys on socials.
Awesome. So our website is www.taraki.co.uk. That's taraki.co.uk. We are on Insta, Twitter, TikTok now as well. And then we are also kind of on a few different social medias, but it's all on our website. But if you just search for Taraki, you'll find it.
Great. And what events have we got coming up in the future that people might feel they would like to join?
We have our men's group is meeting up next week, and they're looking at the topic of like baby loss and miscarriage. Our women's group is meeting up next week, and they're looking at the topic of menstrual cycle and mental health. Then our student group is meeting up the following week, and they're looking at relationships. So if you just search for Taraki and Eventbrite, all of our stuff is on there.